Hello everyone. So let us get started with the webinar. Thanks a lot for joining and again welcome. Still a lot of participants are joining, so I'm admitting them as we speak. But a couple of things which I want to mention before I get started with the webinar. First thing is that this webinar is being recorded. So we'll be uploading the recording on our YouTube channel, and I'll also be sharing the recording to all of those who have registered for the webinar. That way you can re-watch some aspects of the webinar in case you have missed something. Secondly, we won't be having voice participation in this webinar because of the large call size, but please feel free to ask questions in the chat. I'll try to clarify as many of them as the webinar proceeds. And the final thing what I want to mention is that my main purpose with this webinar is not for this to just be a 1 hour webinar and then you go away and then you forget everything what you have learned. But I'll actually provide you a practical toolkit so that the things which you learn in the webinar will actually be useful even after the webinar is over. So throughout this webinar, I'll be sharing several practical resources, links, and documents which you can use later for studying and learning. So with that, let's get started. First, I want to share this form with everyone to get a basic understanding of uh, your proficiency in terms of generative AI and large language models. So you can just go ahead and quickly fill this form. It just 4 to 5 questions and it's pretty easy to answer. And while you fill this form, I'll meanwhile get started with the presentation. I hope my screen is visible over here. So let me get started. The main goal for me today is that I want to provide all of you with a roadmap so that you can build your profile in this field and which will help you if you want to make a career transition or if you're planning to apply to grad school or if you're just planning to upskill yourself in the industry or whatever your goals are. There is so much signal or there is so much noise, I should say, around this space that sometimes it becomes difficult for us to know what I should study and what I should not study, which projects I should be doing. How should I even get started learning about this? There is just so much information. My whole LinkedIn feed is filled with large language models, generative AI, DeepSeek, etc. So I plan to put some signal in the middle of all of this noise so that all of you have a practical roadmap to get started. Quickly, let me go ahead and introduce the team. So here you can see, although I am the only one presenting right now, but Dr. Rajat and Dr. Shridat are the other co-founders of Vijwara. All of us are pretty active on LinkedIn. We graduated from IIT Madras in 2017, and then we pursued our PhDs. So me and Dr. Shridat pursued our PhDs from MIT, and Dr. Rajat pursued his PhD from Purdue. We returned back to India in 2022 and we started Vijwara at that time. The whole aim was to make AI accessible to all. And as part of that mission, we have released several videos on our YouTube channel. Predominantly, there are 3 to 4 playlists which people like. The machine learning teach by doing, build neural networks from scratch, build large language models from scratch, hands-on large language models, etc. All right. So with that, this is the table of contents which I'm planning to cover in today's webinar. I'll start with generative AI history. Then I'll go into LLMs and essentially what you can do to start learning about LLMs. Then we'll go a bit into LLM projects which you can do, the LLM research which you can do, finally the live LLM bootcamp which we have, and throughout this session we'll be taking Q&As. So feel free to ask your questions in the chat as and when the questions arise in your mind. Before I get started with the technical aspect, as always, I always like to share my story because I was not a traditional machine learning engineer and I had not done any computer science course before. So here's my background. I graduated with a mechanical engineering degree in 2017 from IIT Madras. And at that time, I had absolutely no clue about machine learning at all. In fact, I transitioned to machine learning in the middle of my PhD. So while I was doing my PhD at MIT, I lost interest in the field of mechanical. And the reason is because I went to a job fair where a number of companies had come to offer placements. And then I saw that the number of companies in the field of mechanical engineering was very, very low. In fact, even those companies which are offering jobs in mechanical, they required someone who had some sort of AI expertise. And that really demotivated me. And at some point, I wanted to return back to India and just quit my PhD. But instead, I joined a new research group in machine learning, and that completely changed my life. I received my PhD in the field of machine learning itself in a matter of 3 years, and I published several papers at the end of it. So COVID-19 was my main topic, and the thesis was application of artificial intelligence to model the COVID-19 infections. Here you can see some papers which I published at the end of my PhD and companies which reached out to me. So the main thing I want to highlight here is that all of you in this call, right, you might be from different fields. In fact, let's check out this form and let me see the responses to see which fields all of you are from. So we can see that around 50% of the students are from CS, but the rest 50% are from mechanical, electrical, biological, chemical, physics, material sciences, electronics, marine engineering, etc. So I want to mention to all of you guys in this call that it's completely possible to transition to generative AI, large language models, and machine learning as such. There is no requirement that you have to come from a certain field or you need to have studied a certain thing before you transition to this field. So it is first you should have this belief. Then I will tell you how you can make this switch. The first thing before you make this switch is that you need to have that belief that okay, I can do this. And if you take something from this webinar, if you take this belief, then I will consider that it's been a successful webinar. From the second question, I can see that around 30 to around one third of the people are complete beginners in generative AI. Around 40% have basic knowledge and around 30% have intermediate knowledge. In any case, I'll explain as if I am explaining to someone who is just starting out in this field, and I hope the advice will be beneficial for people across all of these categories. Okay, so first thing is the belief. If I can do it being a mechanical engineer, I'm sure everyone can do it if you are from these fields. Then the second question is how do I do it? Like how to make this transition? So through my journey, I believe that I was a bit lucky because I naturally stumbled upon the right way to learn new topics. I see so many beginners right now make very common mistakes. They directly do GitHub projects, Kaggle projects, they add it to their resume and they feel they are ready to go to job interviews. But that's not the way to do it. Um, and I will teach you how I learned about machine learning from scratch, and I will apply it to the field of generative AI and LLMs today. Since today's webinar is specifically about generative AI, I'm going to give you an approach which now I think is the best way to learn about ML and generative AI. So in terms of symbols, the best way I can call this approach is FFP and R. I've also mentioned this in the chat. So basically, this means fundamentals, practical, and research. We need to have all these three aspects if we want to make a successful transition. The mistake many students actually make is they just have the practical aspect and that too toy projects. They don't do serious projects. Um, in fact, very few people even think about research when they want to transition to LLMs, they want to transition to ML. But that R aspect of it, fundamentals, practical, and research is equally important. And I stress about the first and last aspect a lot because I believe the practical aspect will take care of itself if you have mastered the fundamentals. And even the research will be easier if you have mastered the fundamentals. But if you're not clear about the fundamentals, it's like the whole foundation itself is shaky. So whatever you build on top of that itself will not be very strong. Uh, the first part which I want to cover today is how did we land up here? Why are we having this webinar in the first place? I believe we won't have been having this webinar if certain things did not happen. So I want all of us to be appreciative of the history of this field and the work which researchers have put in to get us to this stage. So if you see, uh, let's say this is Chat GPT, right? I can ask Chat GPT that I want to learn about AI. Can you help me? And this is such a simple question for Chat GPT that all of us now assume that we'll get an amazing, very detailed answer. And we do get a detailed answer. So currently I'm on O3 mini high, but you can choose whichever model you want, and we get a very detailed answer, which is actually helpful. But this was not the case around 60 years back. So how many of us are aware of the Eliza chatbot? Is something troubling you? Can you just mention in the chat if you are aware of this invention? This was in the 1960s, by the way. It's one of the first NLP um, innovations you can call. So let's see how Eliza actually responds. So I'm going to interact with it live right now in front of all of you. So I'm going to say, I let me refresh this. So I'll choose the language as English, and I'll ask the
Please
similar.
tell me what's been bothering you.
Please tell me what's been bothering you. I want to learn about. I think there is some traffic over here, so
Is something troubling you?
yeah, I seem to be unable to interact with it right now because there seem to be many people who are on this site. Yeah,
Is something troubling you?
I want to learn about AI. Can you help me? Can you help me?
What if you never got to learn about AI?
The responses of the chatbot are actually pretty hilarious. So it says that what if you never got to learn about AI? Then I can say, I really want to learn.
You say you really want to learn.
Then it says, you say you really want to learn, and then nothing proceeds really after that, right? So first of all, just take a moment to appreciate where we have come to in 60 years. This was the 1960s, now is the 2020s. Within 60 years, we have come to a state where we have a chatbot which responds almost like a human. And that's pretty awesome, right? But at that time in the 1960s, this was considered to be a revolution, and people really were thinking that this is going to be the next big thing. But that's the first thing which really came out. Here I've just mentioned the generative AI definition, but I'm sure all of us are aware of this right now. It's basically that aspect of artificial intelligence which is used to generate new things. It can be images, text, audio, anything. Uh, Traditional artificial intelligence focuses on tasks like classification, prediction, etc. But we don't essentially create or generate anything new. But generative AI is a field where we create new things. So the definition as such is pretty simple. And in terms of history, 1966 was when the ELIZA chatbot came out, which we saw right now. Then what people realized was the field of neural networks was booming. Jeffrey Hinton and everyone had started to work on backpropagation and awesome things were happening. But neural networks were not enough to generate new text or new stuff. Why was this? Because if we want to create new things, if we want to generate new text, we need to rely on memory, right? Let's say I have a huge paragraph and I mention something at the start of the paragraph, which is equally relevant. To predict new text, I need to keep in mind what has come before for me to predict what the next sentence will be, let's say. But neural networks have no provision essentially of capturing memory. They have no provision of capturing memory. They have no provision of capturing the history at all. And that's when there were three major revolutions which have led us to a place where we are right now. The first is recurrent neural networks, which came out in the 1980s. Second is long short-term memory networks, which was in 1997. And only in 2017, this is where the field kicked off, which led to GPT, etc., where transformers were introduced. Almost everyone has probably forgotten about the role RNNs and LSTMs played in generative AI, but they did play a very, very crucial role. I'll not go too much into the details here, but essentially recurrent neural networks modify neural networks by adding a memory layer. You can think of RNNs as neural networks, but with memory. So if you want to, let's say, if this is the stock price of a company and you want to predict it on day number 10, we might want to use the data from all the previous days, right? Not just day number 9. So memory is quite important here. The future price depends not just on the previous point, but all the values which come before that. So we need the neural network to be flexible in terms of essentially how much past it uses to make a prediction. And RNN solved that problem. Recurrent neural networks have something called as a feedback loop, which you can see over here. That feedback loop acts like a memory component essentially, which can be used to encode something about the past. So RNNs were quite effective due to this feedback loop to predict new things, to generate new sequences. But the main issue which RNNs faced was that they had something which is called as the vanishing gradient problem. Essentially, if you stack multiple of these feedback loops together, gradients go to zero or gradients explode. So learning either never happens or learning happens in a very poor manner. Don't worry if you don't know these terminologies right now. Just try to follow along with me for understanding the evolution. Then in 1997, to solve this vanishing gradient problem, long short-term memory networks or LSTMs were introduced. What did LSTMs do? They essentially maintain two types of memories. They maintain a short-term memory, which is what came just yesterday, and they maintain a long-term memory, which is what has happened way back in the past. So essentially, they have a pathway for short-term recent memories, and they have a pathway for memories which came long ago. So one path is for long-term memories and one path is for short-term memories. If you look at the architecture itself, the green line which runs at the top, that's the long-term memory path. And the pink line which runs at the bottom, that's the short-term memory path. So LSTMs solve the problem of vanishing gradient and they also help us to retain context. We can now encode memory, not just recent memory, but also way back in the past. So this is related to long short-term memory networks. Then in 2017, there was one paper which completely changed the field. How many of you are aware of this paper which I'm showing right now? Attention is all you need. Okay, so I'm pretty sure almost everyone is aware of this, right? Because this is a paper which has essentially led to a revolution in the field. And this is a paper which probably today has more than 100,000 citations. It does have more than 100,000 citations. And the reason this paper is so popular is because it introduced this architecture, which is the transformer architecture. And to understand this, we'll need 4 to 5 lectures. We cannot cover it in one lecture. And I'll mention some resource material if you want to dive deeper into this. But essentially, this is that architecture or this is that one figure which essentially transformed the field of large language models. So 2017 is when this paper came out. 2018 is when the first GPT came out. 2020 is when GPT-3 came out, and 2022 is when GPT 3.5 as a product was released, and that was called ChatGPT. And now we have GPT 4o, etc. So the field has evolved in this way where 2017 transformers came into the picture. 2018, which is just the next year, researchers built upon the transformer architecture and released a new architecture which is called generative pre-trained transformer. This happened in 2018. And at the same time, there was a parallel revolution which was happening, which was with respect to the size of these language models. So if you see on the y-axis, it's basically the number of parameters which we have, right? And if you observe the y-axis scale more carefully, now there are models which very frequently have billions or trillions of parameters. So one understanding or one realization researchers had is that the more you increase the size of these language models, the better they seem to perform. So I'm interacting with GPT-4o right now, right? And it's pretty good. Let's say if I want to ask this question again, it answers pretty well. But just remember that for it to answer this well, there are 1 trillion parameters, you can think about it, who are being adjusted as knobs. So imagine having 1 trillion knobs, and these knobs are fine tuned in such a way that every knob essentially knows something about this question, and all the knobs act together to get the answer which you're seeing right now. To grasp the size of this, you can think of the population of the world itself, right? So the population of the world is around 7 to 8 billion. So every person of the world, if you imagine as one parameter, that still won't be enough to capture the number of parameters in GPT-4. You need around 100 times the population of the world to capture how many parameters there are to exist, there are to construct these models. And that's why they are called LLMs, which are large language models. And when we say large, we mean really, really large, like on the order of hundreds of billions or trillions of parameters. So this is a brief introduction about the field of LLMs itself so that we appreciate why we are having this webinar. So I think that if this paper had not been released, and if ChatGPT had not come out, so if this paper had not been released, GPT would not have been there. Then ChatGPT would not have been there. And I think the field of LLMs and generative AI would not have been as popular as it is today. So we would not be having this webinar if this paper was not released. Um, so that's a brief history of why all of us are sitting here in the first place and what we should be thankful for. The second question is, okay, since all of you have joined this webinar, you probably want to dive into this field and you want to master this field of generative AI and LLMs. So I'm using the word generative AI and LLMs interchangeably, but LLMs is essentially language. So generative AI is not just restricted to producing text, but we can also produce images, audio, video, etc. So why should we care about learning LLMs and why should we care about learning generative AI? It's because the jobs, right? If you look at the job market, almost every company right now, they plan to integrate an LLM layer within their company. They want to do something with generative AI and LLMs. And I run a startup, so same thing for us also. We are looking to integrate LLMs in several areas of our company as well. And whom will we hire for this? We will hire people who have very strong knowledge about LLMs and generative AI. So that's the first reason why more and more people want to learn about this field. The second reason is that many people want to apply to grad school, and for that, they need research publications. One amazing area of research is large language models because literally the whole world is looking at this field right now. It's a very emerging field. So if you master this field and if you have some research papers in this field, it really boosts your profile. It boosts your profile for making a career transition. It boosts your profile for applying for grad school. Or if you're a working professional, let's see in this form how many of us are working professionals here. We can see that around 5% of the people in this web call, or maybe more, right? Around 20-25% are working professionals. And even as a working professional, if you're a senior manager or a junior manager or whichever stage you are in, if your company wants to integrate generative AI or LLMs, you have to play a key role. And you will not be able to play that role unless you have a detailed knowledge of this field itself. If you are operating in a company, revenues matter. So if you have superficial knowledge, it will not lead to impactful decisions. Someone has mentioned in the chat regarding professors, right? Yeah. So I was interacting with a professor from one of the IITs, and it's very surprising, but not all colleges in India, in fact, I would say very few have even started teaching about LLMs. And the reason is because there is no formal course about LLMs which exists for someone to teach. I think around 5 to 10 only 5 to 10% of all engineering colleges in India even have a course on LLMs or generative AI. I believe this should be changed and we are helping to change that a bit. But even professors, right, if you want to integrate this into your teaching at university, for example, you need to have a foundational knowledge. So let me start talking a bit about how do you gain this foundational knowledge now. how do you start learning about LLMs? The first thing is books. So I'm going to divide this into 3 or 4 parts. I'm going to divide it into books, videos, blogs, and then research papers, which will come towards the end. So first of all, before we get started, I want to share a resource document with all of you. So this is the resource document, and let me first make it accessible. Please, please go through this link right now. Click on this link right now. Open this document, and we'll be following this for the rest of today's webinar. This will serve as a resource for you even after the webinar is completed, so that you can take a look and you can learn from this document. So the document is titled List of Resources to Transition to Generative AI. So here I have gotten a notice that due to heavy collaborator use, some tools may be unavailable. If someone is not able to access this document, let me know. I'll create a copy for it and share it with you. First thing which I want to mention is the books, right? So currently, if you search learning about LLMs, there is a huge number of things which appear, right? And so many things from Google, AWS towards data science. So I request people to not make annotations on the screen. That really disturbs the flow, and it also distracts people. So I'm resharing the screen. Um, Okay, so if you search this, right, learning about LLMs on Google, you'll see that several, you'll see several links. Google provides something, AWS has a course towards data science, Data Camp has something. There are Reddit forums, there are GitHub repositories. How would you know where to start learning from? And I faced a very similar issue about 1.5 years back when I wanted to learn about LLMs. So at that time, I was very, very lucky to stumble upon one book, which is the only book you should immediately start reading and immediately start going through if you are a beginner in this field. And that book is Build LLM from Scratch. It's literally it's one of the best books uh, out there, and it has very, very high quality content. If you take it on Kindle, it will cost around 2000 rupees. So it is kind of, it's a bit expensive, but the GitHub repository for this book is publicly available. So if you click on this link over here, you will see the GitHub repository for this book. All the links have been mentioned over here. So the link has been mentioned here, build a large language model from scratch. If you click over here, you will be taken to the GitHub repository. And if you scroll through the GitHub repository now, you'll see that first of all, it already has around 40,000 stars. This is an indication that a repository is very popular, and it is one of the most highly read books in large language models in the last year. But one thing which I would like to mention to all of you is that, see, this book has around 7 chapters, right? And when you start reading a book, everyone is very interested in it. They start going through it, they start understanding it. But then later, what I've seen personally is that there are only a few people who can follow till the end. And that's where discipline comes in. Around when you reach chapter number 3, things start getting a bit hard, because then you have the attention mechanism, and then finally you implement a large language model from scratch. I want to request all of you that when you reach the chapter number 2 or chapter number 3, please don't give up. This is that thing which, if you persevere till the very end, you already will be better than 90% of the people, because they give up after 2 chapters. They have classes, they have the company schedule, they have so many things that they can't fit into their schedule, and so they just don't continue with the chapters. This simple thing itself can distinguish you from others, where if you are the one which reaches till the very end of this book, right, you would have built an LLM fully from the scratch, which means that when I interact with GPT right now, I exactly know how this works. So it's like when you are, let's say, flying a plane, but you don't know how the plane works. It's a pretty bad situation for the pilot, right? Similarly, if you're in a company and you want to integrate generative AI and that's tied to revenue, but you don't know how it works, the nuts and bolts, it's not a good situation. Even as a student, if you just copy a Kaggle project or a GitHub project and put it in your resume, And if the interviewer asks you a question about how the attention mechanism actually works, you will not know this if you don't know the nuts and bolts. This book will teach you everything about how GPT is built from scratch. And then you will get so much confidence, because then you will feel that nothing is difficult for you anymore. You know how an LLM works. And it's not something which is extremely hard. In this book, they have tried to distill it into basics, complete basics. And one more thing I would like to mention is that if you are someone who cannot follow books, let's say, or who cannot take books to completion, I have made a series on this. So this is Build LLM from scratch. And if the budget for the book is bit high for you, it's no problem. You can just follow this YouTube series. And I've mentioned the link also over here, Building LLMs from Scratch. This series is such that it's tailored to the book itself, and I've divided it into 43 videos. One thing which you notice here, right? This trend of people not completing videos is visible here, right? See, the first video has around 140,000 views, correct? But see later what happens. Very few people have reached the end and have actually built an LLM. So things are interesting at the start. It's new, it's something very cool. But the moment you come to lecture number 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, right? These are tough lectures, long lectures. Like this lecture is 1 hour, 1 hour, 20 minutes, for example, if you see. These are long lectures, but they are so valuable that once you go through them, once you make notes on your own, you will be much ahead than others in this whole field of LLM learning itself. In fact, there are people who message me every day saying they have made notes for this. I now have around 10 to 11 handwritten notes of students who have finished this entire course. So the material is available for you to learn from. Now you just have to make time for it, be disciplined, and go through this every day. So I've taken it fully from scratch. You need no prerequisites. Even I cover everything about linear algebra in this videos itself. So plan it accordingly, right? If there are 43 videos here, and if on an average each video is around 40 minutes, you can make a commitment to yourself that every day from 7 p.m. to 8 p.m., I will sit, I will watch a video, and I will make notes. That's it. And if you do this, let's say for 40 days, within 1 to 1.5 months, you would have completed this course, and you would have known how to build GPT from scratch. This link is also mentioned over here. So you can click on this, and then you will be taken to the playlist. And should we know Python first? So no, there is no requirement for even Python, etc. I explain every single line of the code from scratch in this video. So thanks everyone who is mentioning positive things about these videos. It took me around 3 to 4 months to make these videos itself. And I've made it for people who want to learn from scratch. If you want quick videos, there is a series on YouTube which is like 45 minutes. In 45 minutes, there is no way you can learn how to build an LLM from scratch. So yeah, so first thing in this call, please make a commitment that if you want to start learning LLMs, I will allocate, let's say you make a commitment to yourself that I will allocate 45 minutes every day to go through the video and making notes. No matter what happens in the day, which means that even if, for example, you have office or you are busy, it's fine. You just have to make time for it and you have to finish it. So I hope that if I'm saying this, at least some of you will take it seriously and start your learning journey. I really want everyone should know how to build an LLM from scratch. It's like a fundamental skill, I believe. So that's the first book, okay? And if you have done this first book, then I have now finished making a playlist on hands-on large language models also. Let me talk about this second book now. This second book is everything about applications. So if you go to this and click on hands-on LLM, this is not the video, but if you click on the book first, it's fully about applications, which means if you finish reading this book, you will learn how to use LLMs for text classification. You will learn how to use LLMs for text clustering. You will learn advanced prompt engineering. You will learn about retrieval augmented generation. You will learn about multimodal LLMs. You will learn about text embedding models. You will learn about fine tuning. You will learn about all of these things in this book. Again, very, very good book. And this author I respect a lot, J. Alamar, one of the finest educators we have in the LLM space at this moment. And they have written a wonderful book. But unfortunately, this book does not go into the nuts and bolts of how LLMs work. And it's not even designed for that. It's purely an application based book. So if you have finished the LLM from scratch series, there is a second series which I have that has around 30 videos and that completely follows everything what is mentioned in this book, all 12 chapters. So if you go through this, you will see that you will build a text classification model using LLMs, you will build a text clustering model, prompt engineering. There is like 1 hour, 2 hours of content. So when people think of prompt engineering, they think like it's something simple, or but there is a proper theory behind it. So this 2 hours of content on prompt engineering. Then we go to LangChain and agents. Then we code our first LLM agent. Then we go to RAG. All of these terms, let them not scare you at the moment. But what I'm suggesting is that all of this is a very streamlined approach, which means you have to finish this series first. Once you finish this series, then you finish the series on applications. It makes so much sense that way, right? So that way you cover the first two aspects of learning, which I mentioned at the start, that F and P, which is basically the fundamentals and the practicals. In the first video series, we don't have practical examples here. It's more about the fundamentals, but the second has around 10 hands-on projects which you can implement, and you can also add these in your resume if you want. So this is the practical series for everyone who is interested in practical aspects of LLM. But please don't neglect the fundamental aspect just because you're doing the practical aspects. So a mistake which many people do, they may go through one such video, right? And they will code an LLM agent and then add it to their resume without going through the foundations. Don't make that mistake. So that is the second book which I wanted all of you to be aware about. Um, and the third book is for only those who want to build LLMs for production, who are working in industry right now. This is the book which is titled Building LLMs for Production. And I've also mentioned the link to this. They also have a GitHub repository on this. It's pretty awesome, and I plan to cover a video series on it pretty soon. I've not yet started covering the videos on this, but it's there in the plan. So I wanted to make a video series on this after the hands-on LLMs, but currently I'm making the DeepSeek series. So I've not gotten enough time for that. But anyways, if you have finished the first two series and if you are wanting to apply LLMs in production, take a look at this repository. It's honestly a bit difficult. So if you try to follow their instructions, this book is not as coherent and clear as the other two books. It's meant for someone who already has some decent level understanding of engineering practices, etc. But if you have already implemented some production level front end, back end, or something, then I suggest you go through this as well. So that's the third book which I would mention to all of you. So this is the book aspect. Then comes the second aspect, which are accompanying videos. And I already mentioned to you some videos which can accompany the books. So the first video is the build LLM from scratch. Second is hands-on LLMs, which I mentioned to you already. I have mentioned two other videos in this, which is Andre Karpathy's video. The first is an intro to language modeling. This is one video, and his second video is intro to Chat GPT. And I believe now he has released one more 3 hour video. These are very good videos, and I really appreciate uh, Andre Karpathy as an educator and researcher. But personally, I started going through this video and I found it very hard to understand from the basics because he directly jumps into code. So in 2 hours, it's building a GPT. Whereas if you go through this is around 25 hours of content. So I think if you go through this series first, then understanding this video will be much easier. If you directly start out from this video, it will be a bit difficult. Okay, so this is related to the videos, right? And there are four videos which I have over here: building LLMs, hands-on LLMs, Andre Karpathy's two videos. Now let's come to the third part, which I believe is equally important, and that is with respect to blogs. I noticed that several people are asking questions in the chat, but I'm unable to take the questions right now because to finish everything within 8 p.m., within 18 to 20 minutes now. If there are, I'll probably have some time, 2 to 3 minutes of questions towards the end. But I first want to go through this PPT so that all of you receive this information before the time is up. So the third aspect is blogs, right? And the reason I'm talking about blogs is because this is a field which is constantly evolving. So there are some creators whom you should regularly follow if you want updates about what are the new things which are happening in this, what are the new things which are happening in this field. And one person which I really follow a lot is Jay Alamar. So just click on this link and take a look at the different blog posts which he has um, on his website here. And every single blog post which he has is highly visual in nature. So there are many of us learners who are visual learners, right? And we cannot go through too much theory unless there are some images, etc. If you go through, let's go through one of his blog posts. Every blog post of his has a huge number of visualizations, and they are just very well written. He's a very well respected figure in this field also. So this is one blog post to keep an eye on, and the second is our own Substack. So you can go to this link right now, and every time a new paper is published or every time some new innovation happens in this field, we make a Substack post on it. So this is our Substack post, which is on DeepSeek. Every time a new research paper is published, we make a post on it. So these are also long posts, technical posts, but they are written in a way where you'll understand things. So, for example, if you want to learn about a paper which was recently released, but it's very nice, it's a very nice paper. And if you want to understand the basics, you can just read this blog post. So that way you'll stay up to date with the field and what's really going on in the field itself. So this is about blogs, and blogs are important, especially since this is a cutting edge field. To everyone who is asking about recordings, it's being recorded, so don't worry, we'll be uploading the recording um, once the talk is over. So I talked about Jay Alamar's blog and the Visuara Substack. Okay, so until now, this is fine. So in this webinar, until now, we have focused on two aspects, right? We have focused on the F aspect and we have focused on the P aspect. Now let's talk a bit about research. And the reason I'm talking about research is because very few people even think about this when they start learning about a new field. But it's actually that aspect which is extremely important. The reason it is extremely important is because having research papers on your portfolio is not an easy thing to do. So in our company also, let's say if we are hiring for people, if someone has research publications on their profile, and if those publications are in good conferences or in good journals, we take it very seriously because it's not easy to do that. So now comes the question of how do you start contributing to research, right? The first thing which all of you should be doing is developing a sort of a research mindset, which means that you should first develop the knack or develop the skill of reading research papers itself. How many of you regularly read research papers? You can answer honestly in the chat. How many of you read at least one research paper, let's say every 2 weeks? It's not easy to do, right? It's like paper reading is not an easy thing to do. So to all of those who have mentioned, yes, it's quite good that you are reading it, but getting time to read papers is not easy at all because all of us have some fixed commitments, either in the office or in the college or whatever it is, in the university giving lectures, and we don't get time to read papers. Another issue is that there are so many new papers which are coming out that we don't know what are the new, what should I read exactly. So there is a website which is called Papers with Code. And I've also mentioned the link to this website in here, Papers with Code. So you can go over here and check this out. What they do is that here, every week they feature the latest papers in machine learning. So if you click on new, they have new papers which have come out. As the first step, what I suggest all of you is just take one paper of this list and start reading it, whatever it might be. And initially, it might be hard for you. But if you are going through this video contents, which I mentioned to you before, you will slowly start understanding what is written in the papers. Initially, it will be hard, but just stick through it. Assign, let's say, 30-40 minutes to read a paper, make notes. And if you don't understand, don't leave the paper. Just read whatever you can understand. That is one thing. The second thing is that there is an awesome tool which has now been released, which is called Notebook LM. How many of you are aware of this Notebook LM? I'll also put the link in the chat right now. I use this a lot to read research papers now. And the reason I use this tool is because they actually have an option of converting the research papers into a podcast. And it's an amazing thing. So let's say I download this paper, right? Attention is all you need. I have downloaded this right now. And I am finding it difficult to go through this paper and to understand it. What I can do is that I can create a new thing here and I can upload a source, which means I can choose a file to upload over here. And here I have uploaded this attention is all you need file. Okay. That much is fine. That you can do in Chat GPT also. You can upload files. Uh, And the second thing you can do here is interact with files. That is fine. You can do that in Chat GPT also. But the most useful feature of this, which I found, is this deep dive conversation. If you go here and click on generate, it actually generates a 10 to 15-minute podcast of two people speaking to each other. It's the most amazing feature which you will ever see. Oh, I thought my audio was cut down. Yeah, so this is an amazing feature because the podcast is actually extremely detailed. It's like two people who are speaking to each other. And earlier, I thought that it would not be detailed or it would not be comprehensive, but it is amazing. And what you can do after the podcast is generated is you can even customize the podcast. Basically, you can say that I want I want the topic to be about this. I want the topic to be about, or I want the emotion to be like this, etc. And it just works very well. I so this it takes around 5 to 6 minutes. So maybe this won't finish during the time of this webinar, but it generates a 17-minute podcast. I've tried this before, and it's the best way to understand what is going on in a paper. So let's say tomorrow after this webinar, you are inspired, and if you want to learn some paper, or if you want to read this paper and you select this paper, and you have no clue what is written over here, so no problem. You just go to Notebook LM, you download the PDF, you generate the podcast, and at least listen to the podcast. If you don't manage to read the paper, that is fine. At least you should develop or devote 20 to 25 minutes to listen to this podcast and then make a summary of what has been mentioned in this podcast, and what did you understand from it. That itself will keep you updated with this field, and that itself will make sure that you are up to date with the latest things, and then you will start enjoying the field of LLMs also. This did not exist before, so research paper reading was difficult for people, but now it's possible. So why not we take advantage of it, and this fully free, so you don't even have to worry about cost, etc. So the second commitment which I want all of you to make in this call is that the first commitment is going through the video, spending 30 to 40 minutes. The second commitment is at least, and I'm writing this in the chat, at least one research paper in LLMs in a week. So at least one research papers in the field of LLMs in a week. That if you manage to do, that itself will be a big thing, because then it will set up a routine, it will set up a habit, and every week then hopefully you will learn something. And this should be supplemented with the first two things which I mentioned before, which is the fundamentals and the practical. The research is the slowest of these three aspects. So fundamentals, practicals, and research, right? The research is the slowest, but very ironically, the slowest part is the one which gives you the most rewards. So I told you about my story before, right? And I believe I got the job offers from companies only because of my research. I did not update my resume until the last year of my uh, until the last year of my PhD. And I uploaded my resume only when I had my first research publication. And then recruiters started reaching out to me. That's the benefit of doing research. The last thing is that after you have gone through the videos and after you have understood the basics, there should be some real life projects which you should start doing. And I've mentioned some real life projects. This project teaches you to build a character level LLM from scratch. So this is a character level LLM. This project teaches you to build a GPT from scratch, and this project teaches you how to build a multimodal LLM, which means an LLM which deals with text and images from scratch. Instead of, so many students have a project such as I built a RAG-based thing using on their resume, right? You know why that does not have an impact? Because if I search RAG-based chatbot tutorial right now, if I search this, there will be a huge number of tutorials which will teach you how to build a RAG-based chatbot. There is even a 10-minute video. And so this is the worst thing, honestly, you can do as a student, right? Go through this video for 10 minutes, quickly build a chatbot and put it on your resume. That's not good because it's not following the three things which we discussed. It's not building your fundamentals. This is not an impactful project at all because um, every single student might have this project, right? What distinguishes you from other students? But very few people will actually take the time and effort to build these projects. If you have built a multimodal LLM from scratch as an interviewer, I would like to interact with you further. And I would like to know, oh wow, how did you build this multimodal LLM? What were the challenges which you faced, etc. So, and regarding the compute for these projects, right? All of these projects are made by these people so that it does not take GPUs on your end. In fact, Andre Karpathy has a repository which is called Nano GPT. You can run this today on your CPU. So none of this project requires you to spend money on GPUs. You can do all of these projects on CPU itself. And that is the advantage of doing these projects. You don't have to rely on compute. You can just build it on the CPU itself, and you can have that on your resume. So just keep this in mind regarding toy projects and doing impactful projects. Okay, so this brings me to one of the last slides of my presentation with respect to research, right? And I've mentioned some research papers in this in this document, which you can start going through. If you read these research papers, you will see that they are very nicely written, which means everyone can understand what is mentioned in these research papers. And then hopefully you will get an idea that, oh, okay, I can also work on these papers. So that is pretty nice, right? If someone has worked on a research paper before, and these ones I've deliberately mentioned here so that they'll be easy to read. So all of us discussed about reading one research paper in 1 week, right? These can be the first research papers you start with. And then I've chosen these research papers so that after you go through them, you will think that I can also do something like this if I construct my problem nicely. I can also do something like this if I think about a problem creatively. So there are some low hanging fruits in the research space which you can try doing, and hopefully this gives you ideas to do that. Now, before we conclude, the last thing which I want to share is there are many of us who don't like learning from videos or don't like learning from passive learning, right? So I can see number of people in this call who have actually enrolled for our live courses, and I'm just going to share this link with you. If you are interested, you can check it out. So basically, what we are doing is that I'm teaching two courses in large language models live on Saturday and Sunday. So you can scroll down on this link and you can go to this thing which is called Generative AI and LLM Mastery Programmed Electives. So we are teaching four courses actually. This semester I'm teaching two of these. So if you go through this document, I'm teaching two courses among this semester. The first is Generative AI Fundamentals. And there are around 25, 26 lectures. We have lectures every weekend. And the second course is building a GPT from scratch. So if you prefer learning live, like in a university style, now you can imagine that there is a university course which is happening around you, right? So there is nothing which is preventing you from enrolling. We have finished only 5 to 6 lectures so far. So if you're interested in learning live, you can already register and start with the generative AI fundamentals and the build LLM from scratch. In the next semester, what we'll be doing is that in the next semester, we are teaching two other courses, which is LLM production and deployment. That's the first course. And the second is LLM capstone project. So everyone who has enrolled in this capstone project will essentially build a project and then we will convert it into a research publication. So this is basically guided live courses for students. So if you are someone who is self-motivated, you can follow exactly like what I've mentioned over here, and every single thing over here is free. But if you are someone who would like to learn from a university style teaching, who would like to, let's say, receive assistance with respect to lectures and basically be guided for the LLM projects, where here we'll choose the topic for you. When you reach course number 3 and when you reach course number 4, we will choose the topic for you and then that will be converted into a publication at the end. So in this link itself, you will see that when you go towards the end, there will be a registration link, right? So you can click on this and you can enroll in this program. So if you have any doubts about this program or if you would like to talk or get your doubts clarified, you can email us at hello@vijuvara.com. But please email us as soon as possible because 5 lectures are done. It's still not very late to enroll because we record every lecture. You can click on the link over here, enroll in this program, and I'll also share the enrollment, not this. So every course here is priced at 15,000 rupees. So there are 4 courses. So totally it's 60K for 4. You don't have to register for all 4. You can even register for individual courses. We have 2 classes every week. So it's 1.5 hours on Saturday and 1.5 hours on Sunday. And there are people from India, USA, Europe, Germany, etc. Every class has around 35 to 40 people. So the registration link also let me share with you. If yeah, this is the registration link. So this is guided approach. If you want to learn from someone, so I'll be the course instructor for this year. Next year, the course instructors might be different, where we'll also uh, look at hiring some new course instructor. But since it's the first year where we are doing this, I'm teaching all the courses myself over here. So it's like around 3 hours of teaching every week for the courses. Um, I shared the link for this also, so you can check. So now think about this, right? To transition to generative AI, you have several options at your disposal. The first option is, of course, as we discussed, developing your fundamentals. And for that, you have to go through this playlist, which is building LLM from scratch and hands-on LLMs. That's the F part of the fundamentals. Second is practical, which is this hands-on LLM, doing practical projects. And the third part is research. As we discussed, make a commitment to finish reading and make a summary of at least one paper every week. And here I have mentioned a link to 2 papers which you can get started with. I've selected them so that they'll be easy to read. Now, if this is something which you feel you will be held more accountable for live learning, you can go to this link which I've shared again and take a look at the generative AI bundle over here. So this, if you scroll down below, you'll see generative AI bundle and enroll here for the live courses. Yeah, so all those options are available to you at your disposal. So you can select whichever one you essentially want. But whatever you do now, you can see all the resources which are there, right? Which have all been documented over here. After this lecture, I hope many of you are motivated to start your LLM journey. Most of these tools are available for free, which means that there is actually nothing which is preventing you from getting started, right? All these videos are fully available for free. So if you want to learn, you can directly go ahead, start learning. Many of these YouTube videos are like, there is nothing preventing you from learning apart from the discipline. In any case, I noticed several doubts. So if you have any doubts with respect to live courses or any other doubts, you can email us at hello@vijuvara.com. And I will try to answer as soon as as soon as possible. I will check all the emails which you have been receiving. So unfortunately, it is the end of time right now. So I will not be able to take more questions on the chat. But if you want your questions to be clarified, please email us at hello@vijuvara.com. Thanks a lot, everyone. I will be conducting more such sessions every month. So every month I'm planning 2 sessions on different topics. So I look forward to seeing you in other sessions. Maybe I'll share this document link once more, um, in case someone has not accessed it. Yeah, check it here. Go to this document link and please start your LLM journey. The commitment which you have mentioned, please try to follow up with it with respect to the videos, with respect to reading the research papers. Again, thank you so much, everyone, and I look forward to seeing you in the next webinar. Thank you. Bye.